We have some important news around the NHL to discuss this morning, including confirmation of the Kirby Dach injury in Montreal. We also have some other injury updates on Luke Schenn and Josh Norris in Ottawa. Some major concerns around Winnipeg Jets attendance. And we had a couple of records set last night as well by Makar and Darisaitl. All that coming up next. Well, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some interesting, important news updates to talk about here early in the day. We got confirmation not long ago, earlier today, from the Montreal Canadiens confirming, unfortunately, the worst for Kirby Dach and the knee injury that we knew he sustained a few days ago against the Chicago Blackhawks. We had reports from Sportsnet's Eric Engels, I believe it was yesterday, suggesting that he had suspected that it could be a torn ACL and MCL, and that Dach could be in for a significant recovery, and that unfortunately is indeed the case. The Montreal Canadiens social media accounts earlier confirmed that news for us, confirming that Kirby Dach is going to require knee surgery, and unfortunately his season has come to an abrupt end so early. It's an unfortunate news. We know the Canadiens, as I talked about before, were absolutely ravished with injuries last year. So many man games lost. It was crazy. And not only that, I mean, you feel for the team, but you feel for the player. I mean, he's still young in his early 20s. Former third overall pick, has sustained a lot of injuries in his young career. And this is just another one to add to the list. I mean, obviously, though, injuries do take their toll on the human body. There's no doubt about it. And it can impact your ability to be the same kind of player that you were, and I hope that's not the case for him, that he can rebound 100% and still be the same effective player. It looked like he was due for a big season, to be honest. I thought he was going to end up playing a lot possibly with Cole Caulfield and Suzuki at times, and just unfortunately never worked out. It also happened against his former club, which is unfortunate to get checked into the bench there by Tenorti. But bad news on Kirby Dach. Some other injury updates. The Nashville Predators have lost defenseman Luke Schenn. He's going to be out for about 4 to 6 weeks recovering from an injury. And on a more positive note, Ottawa Senators top 6 center Josh Norris appears to be making his return finally tonight against the Washington Capitals. Norris has been out since the late last year. Obviously, he sustained a shoulder injury last year, tried going the rehab route, missed a bunch of time, came back, and it was short-lived. Ended up going back out, having the surgery, I believe, which was, I'm pretty sure was in January. And then, everybody thought he'd be good to go for training camp, considering how long ago that was. I even seen interviews with him leading into training camp saying that he expected to be 100%, but unfortunately that was not the case, given the injury history of him and his young career. Kind of like Dach. I mean, he's got a lot of injuries in that young body, especially in the shoulder, and the team wanted to be extra cautious, so they took a little longer to get him in the lineup. But he's gone through a lot of testing, and DJ Smith confirmed that the plan is for him to play tonight. So that is fantastic news for the Ottawa Senators. They're still without Shane Pinto, but they get Norris back. That'll help them balance out their top 3 lines. He's expected to play with Drake Batherson, who he's had a lot of chemistry with and who he's played with a lot over the years during their time, not only in Ottawa, but in the AHL before they both graduated to being full-time NHLers as well. And on his other side is expected to be Dominic Kubalik. So this will allow them to keep their top line together of Stützle, Giroux, and Tkachuk. And the other line that's been playing well, so there's no point in breaking them up, is Ridley Gregg playing with Vladimir Tarasenko and Matthew Joseph. And you can put this line together. You can kind of have 2 second lines in a way. So that'll push down Rourke Chartier and then Mark Kastelik and Parker Kelly. Looks like Zach McEwen is going to be the healthy scratch tonight for the Sens against the Washington Capitals. As I mentioned, a couple of records were set last night, and they're very impressive ones at that. Edmonton Oilers star forward Leon Draisaitl set a Oilers franchise record, becoming the all-time leader in power play goals with 127. Considering the high-octane offense the Oilers had during their run during the 80s and early 90s, and the amount of high-profile Hall of Fame type players who put up huge offensive numbers. I know Gretzky didn't obviously play there super long. He was there for quite a while, but even Gretzky's numbers were insane, even though he, did end up playing a long time elsewhere. still, like, he left his mark there for sure. But you had Gretzky there for a long time. You had Mark Messier, Jari Kurri, Glenn Anderson, Paul Coffey, and the list goes on. Like the stars that they had there, and Leon Draisaitl now with 127 power play goals at a fairly young age, mind you. Leon's not that old. He's going to keep adding to this for quite some time. I mean, obviously Leon's going to need a new contract, I think, in the next year or so, but I believe they'll try to keep him there at all costs. He's too important to lose. They'll figure that out, I'm sure, but at the same time, like, imagine by the time he's done what that number's going to be. It's going to be absolutely smashed record for sure. And Cale Makar set a very impressive record as well. Now, this is not like an all-time record. This is just what he's on pace for. But at this point, he is the fastest defenseman in NHL history to hit 250 points, which he's over a point per game in his career. 241 games played. That means he's on a faster pace. He's on a higher point per game pace at this young stage of his career than Bobby Orr, who's arguably regarded the greatest all-time offensive defenseman by many people. Denny Potvin, although another very high prolific offensive defenseman, was on a similar pace as well early in his career. Obviously, Makar's ahead of him. So by the time Cale Makar is all said and done, if he plays long enough, he's easily going to have multiple Norris trophies under his resume, and he might even be the greatest of all time. It's hard, the potential is there. It's early in his career. We don't know the longevity. We don't know how long he'll keep up this level of play. Of course, it's hard to predict, but the potential is there that we may be watching, the greatest defenseman, offensively speaking, in history. It's quite possible. We'll have to wait and see. It's going to be fun to watch this young man's career unfold and see if he can continue this trajectory and see if he'll become that player, near the end. Hopefully he can play another, 15, 16, 17 years. That'd be fun from an entertainment perspective and great for him to be able to break all kinds of records. Now, the other issue I want to talk about today quickly is attendance in Winnipeg. It's a lot of people talking, and it's concerning. Winnipeg, as we know, is one of the smaller markets across the NHL. Their NHL arena sits around just, I think it's a little over 16,000. And they, for the longest time after moving there from Atlanta, have never had an attendance issue. Like, for the longest time, like, they typically sold out a lot, and they had a high attendance. Everything was great. Not off to a good start this year. For starters, their home opener, because they had their second home game last night, and their home opener did not sell out. That was a little bit of a, eye-opener, so to speak. They were about 85-86% capacity. And then last night was the return of Pierre-Luc Dubois and the Los Angeles Kings. I understand it's a Tuesday night. Even though Dubois might be a draw, the Kings themselves might not be a draw. They're not a huge rival to the Jets. I guess I kind of get it, but at the same time, even for the games that were not rival games and some of the I guess teams that their local fans might consider less interesting, if you want to call it that, they usually never dip this low. They only had just over 11,000 fans. That's it was well over, it's like 11,000, I think it was 600 or something like that. So it was well over 4,000 empty available seats. For a small market, that's huge. I know I've heard some people saying, well, maybe the local fans aren't really embracing a rebuild, but are they really rebuilding? I mean, they just signed Scheifele and Hellebuck to long-term deals. They've retooled a little bit in the offseason. They have a good amount of youth coming into this organization. I mean, I understand the team at this point is not considered a cup contender. They did have a brief window where they were looked upon after going to the conference finals against the Golden Knights back, what that would be like 4 or 5 years ago now. At that point, for a year or two, they were considered a cup contender. And then things kind of started to fall off. And they're still a good team. They're kind of in that mushy middle, so to speak, what I talked about, whereas you're not really a cup contender, but you're not a lottery team either. You're somewhere in between, and that can be challenging for some. But I don't know if this is a case of local fans not embracing a rebuild, because I did hear that from a few people. And I don't know if it's fair to say that the Jets are rebuilding. I haven't really heard the organization call it that. Based on the moves they've made, I don't think it's fair to say that. I mean, they traded Dubois, but they got a good haul in return. They inked a couple of their star players long-term just a short time ago. They have some young guys already, graduated into the NHL roster. They've got a bunch more coming. I don't know. I think there's lots of reason to be optimistic about the Jets possibly being a playoff team this year. It's not out of the question. And the next few years could be even better as they hopefully continue to improve and get more of these young players up to speed. So I don't know what's going on in Winnipeg, but I know there's all kinds of NHL cities that are interested, and there's lots of fans that live in non-NHL cities that want to see them get a team, and this is going to stir them up, I'm sure, talking about, well, bring them here, we'll support them. And it's only a couple of games. There's no reason for panic. But I do think that this is a trend that's concerning and something that we need to watch. The Jets themselves in their own verbiage and the choice of words, and especially from like Cheveldayoff and management talking to the fans and stuff, they've made it clear they need fan support. They've never come out and said, like, if you don't come to the games, we're going to be in trouble. They've never said anything like that. They have an owner who's, very stable, but at the same time, it's business, and if the business isn't profitable, that's bad news. You have to wonder, what changes will come, and they certainly don't want to lose their team for a second time. I know that. But what is causing them to have attendance issues right out of the gate? Usually, even teams that typically struggle with attendance, you quite often will see a bump positively in the beginning because they're excited about a new season. It takes a while usually for the negativity to set in and say, it's not our year. I'm not going to the games. This team isn't very good. Like, you've only seen a couple games. Like, a lot of them didn't show up for the home opener in the first place. So how do you know, right? Like, it's concerning. I mean, I know the NHL is probably going to expand. We've heard about that. And I know the NHL is not officially in that mode right now, according to Gary Bettman, but there's lots to be optimistic about that will happen in the next few years. You got teams, or not teams, but cities like Salt Lake City and Houston in the U.S. I know Quebec City's interested, whether or not they get one, because they're also a small market. But then you can also compare that's like, they might be smaller markets like Winnipeg and Quebec City. Compare that to Toronto, which is a massive market. But then look at what the games that the Leafs have been having issues with their atmosphere. Like Austin Matthews in their first game against the Canadiens scores a hat-trick goal, a comeback at that late in the game with like a minute left. Hat-trick tying goal to send it to overtime and get the Leafs in it. And you don't even there's barely any hats on the ice. It's a very corporate crowd. You don't see them getting into it. It's quiet in there. It's not your loud, ruckus, rah-rah type of environment where a lot of fans getting excited cheering their team on. It's quite different. And that's concerning to me as well for a whole different reason. I mean, the Leafs are by no means concerned about their drawing of fans in attendance and all that. They make tons of money. They always have a full crowd. Like there's no problems there. It's just, it just goes to show you the difference in the markets. And Winnipeg is far from being in trouble, but it's a story that we need to pay attention to and watch closely, because if it doesn't get better, it's only going to build that story over time and see if it becomes a bigger story. So we'll see where things go. Of course, I'll be back later with another recap of the rest of the NHL news, probably likely some rumors around the league as well to discuss tonight. So certainly stay tuned for that. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. So your area, this is the place to be to get all your NHL news on all 32 teams with multiple videos per day. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.